All right. Hey guys, welcome to Bold Carry. We were trying to set up some nice uh laptops and everything so we could switch between videos and everything like that. At the moment, I'm just on my phone because all that was not working and about, I don't know, 25 minutes late, something like that. So, I'm here. We're going to talk about rule number 3. I don't know how many people are on yet, but we're going to start talking about rule number 3. So, I'd like to start out with saying that, hey, look, I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment. I've seen a lot of comments throughout my channel that are like, hey, these idiots, they they need to take an IQ test before they handle a gun, or some of these guys should never handle a gun again. I can kind of understand what you're saying, but as far as uh, Second Amendment wise, uh, that I don't believe that they need a license. I don't believe they need any training to be able to purchase or handle a firearm. Now, training is our job. Are those of us who know what we're doing, we're responsible, right? Whether we're doing that for money or we're helping people out, friends and family like that. That's our responsibility to make sure that they're responsible, and that's why I do the videos that I'm doing so that we can help those who need help. Okay. So, with that, let's talk about the rules of firearm safety. So, the rules of firearm safety, you've got two big camps. You've got either those who espouse 4 rules or those who espouse 3 rules. I'm more of the 3 rule camp, although I do explain the 3 rules in more of a 4 rule. I break the first one up. And here's what 4 rulers will say. So, number one, treat every weapon as if it's loaded, and you perform a clearance check every time you pick up the gun. Number two, you never point the gun at anything you're not willing to destroy. And number three, you keep your finger off the trigger until you're on target, ready to shoot. Number four, we know our target and what is beyond it. Good. I like those rules. However, I like to simplify it by saying 3 rules. One, always keep the gun pointed in a safe direction. And the reason why that's number one is because you literally have to plan that out before you ever pick up the gun. Because the gun's sitting on a table or in a case, before we even touch it, we need to plan out, is that a safe direction? Will anyone get harmed if I point it in that direction? And what's beyond what I'm pointing it at, right? I might be pointing it at a wall, might be pointing at this map, but what's behind this map, right? Is it drywall? Is it block? What is it? Okay. So that's rule number one. And then rule number two, when we pick up the gun, we need to make sure we keep our finger high and off the trigger. And I am going to use this. This is not a gun. This is a piece of plastic that shoots a laser. All right. My cat loves it. So, and YouTube loves cats, right? So don't mark me off for using a piece of plastic that shoots a laser. Okay. It's not a firearm. All right. So rule number two is that until we're on target, we keep our finger high outside the trigger guard, right? So once I've decided to shoot something, I can then place my finger on the trigger. Not before then, only after I've decided. And then rule number three is that we keep the firearm unloaded until it's ready for use. And to do that, when we pick up the firearm, every time we pick up the firearm, whether somebody gave it to us or whether we picked it up out of a case or out of a safe, we check to make sure the gun is unloaded. So let's see. Make sure I'm not getting out of order. All right. So because we don't have the videos to show, I'm sure many of you have seen the videos that I'm talking about and I've referenced. So let's talk about some of them because I've had people tell me, look, my guns are for self defense 100% of the time, and they're always going to be loaded. Okay, so let's take that into consideration. Um, I cannot tell you for security reasons and because I really just don't know without sitting down and counting. I don't know how many guns I have. Okay. But I know I have about 5 at the house that are different shapes, sizes, but they are for self-defense. And they do have a loaded magazine inserted into them. When they are on me, the chamber of that gun is loaded 100% of the time. If they're not on me, then the chamber is not loaded. Magazine is in the gun, ready to go if I need it. If you don't want to do that, that's fine with a self-defense gun. But the point being is that there's probably another 8 or 10 guns that I have that I use for training that don't need to be loaded at all times because I will never use them for self-defense. Okay, so those specific guns, the ones that are in my case, my classroom case that I bring with me every class I do, those guns are unloaded when they're in the case, locked away. And when I take them out for a class, I cycle the slide back and I make sure that they're unloaded, magazine out, everything like that. Okay, so a gun that is not available for self-defense, it can't be available, right, in a moment's notice, does not need to be loaded. Plain and simple. If you watch rule number 3, clear the chamber and your conscience video on my channel, you will see very first video, there is an officer who is at a sporting goods store and he is taking, he has received a firearm from the clerk and he's looking at it. I believe it was a little .380 pocket pistol or something like that. But everyone should agree that that firearm coming from a display case, that firearm was on display, should not be loaded. Now, it was the clerk's responsibility to make sure that that gun was unloaded. And then as the customer, especially as a police officer, right, he should have checked the chamber and cleared it. He did not do that. So because he assumed that it was unloaded, he pulled the trigger. He did have it pointed in an unsafe direction, which was into his other hand, and he shot himself. Okay, second video on that, we see a younger guy who's in his living room, it looks like, who is cycling a shotgun. And clearly the gun goes off. In the longer version of that, you can see him cycle it quite a few times. I don't really understand how it was loaded with as many times as he cycled the slide, but he clearly did not clear the firearm while he was performing some sort of function test on the gun inside his house. And he put a hole into his ceiling. You can clearly see that happen on that video. So display, guns on display, no need for them to be loaded. They are not self-defense guns. Guns that you're working with, doing function checks, do not need to be loaded. They're not self-defense for self-defense. Guns that are being cleaned, many guns, when you field strip them, require you to pull the trigger. Okay, so you do need to remove that magazine, get them. If you're going to leave the mag loaded, get the mag out of the room, get the ammo, double check the chamber, make sure that chamber is clear, and do not pull that trigger to disassemble that gun until you are 100% sure that that thing is unloaded. Okay, so guns that are for display, guns that you're function checking, that you're not function checking live fire, and guns that you're going to clean or guns that you are storing and cannot be used for self-defense do not need to be loaded. Plain and simple. Now, if you have one gun in your house and it is for self-defense, I understand if you keep that thing loaded for self-defense almost all the time, because still and yet, like we talked about, if it's being cleaned, obviously you have to unload it. There are still certain circumstances that you will have to unload that gun if you're going to dry fire practice with it, for instance, right? You don't want to, if you dry fire with a loaded gun, it's not dry fire, all right? That's just a little tip, okay? It's live fire. And there have been plenty of people who've made that mistake because they don't follow rule number 3, as the NRA stated it, as many other instructors have stated it, not just me. Okay, I didn't invent that. I've learned this from other people, and there's a reason why it's there, is because people do have accidents when they handle firearms in an environment when it should be unloaded, but it's not. Take the instructor demonstrating with, hey, you know this 44 mag, you can shoot it in single action, right? It would have been totally fine for him to demonstrate all of that to his students on the range, pointed in a relatively safe direction, kind of pointed down range, right? And pulling the trigger to demonstrate how to do that for his students. The problem was he didn't follow rule number 3. He didn't perform a clearance check on that gun when he picked it up, and it was already loaded. Did he have it in his case loaded? Was that something he carries on him loaded? I don't know. But I do know he did not follow rule number 3. So, do we have anybody watching? Any comments? What do we got? My cameraman. Nothing? Nothing really? All right. So, just real quick so that we're covering this again. This is not a firearm, okay? This is a piece of paper that my 8-year-old helped me make, and he did a pretty good job. All right. So, rule number 3, to make sure that we comply, at least with a semi-automatic, this is how you do it. You're going to hit that magazine release right there. You're going to take the mag out. See, that thing's got rounds in it. All right. So we made sure we remove the mag. But that's not the only thing you got to do on a semi-automatic. You're going to need to rack the slide to the rear. Oh, look at that. That little round came out of there. All right. And now we're going to check the chamber. Make sure that that chamber is empty. It looks good to me, seeing as it's paper. All right. And then I'm going to leave that open because I'm going to do some maintenance on it. Okay. I'm not going to close it if I don't need to load it again. All right. So that's simply how you do that. And I did all that. I demonstrated that for you without violating any YouTube policies. Isn't that great? All right. So, as far as one more thing, as far as passing firearms, okay, let's talk about that real quick, because that is one other thing that you need to make sure. If you're going to pass a firearm to somebody, unload the gun. And when I say unload the gun, I mean take the source ammunition out, take that mag out. If you got a revolver, open up that cylinder, get all the rounds out. Make sure on a semi-auto that you rack that slide to the rear, lock it so that you can inspect the chamber, and then you are going to hand the firearm over to that other person so that they can grip it, right? They can grip the grippy part, okay? And leave it open so that they can inspect the chamber as well, okay? Because a firearm that you're showing off, like we talked about, firearms that are on display don't need to be loaded, okay? So again, remove the mag, rack the slide to the rear, make sure that chamber's clear, and then you can pass it around and you don't have to worry about hurting anybody, even if shouldn't violate any of the other rules. But even if during that process, during that handling process, one of the other rules was violated, right? You've got 2 other rules that back up that safety. That's why we follow all 3, because accidents do happen. Okay. Mistakes do happen. So if you follow 2 of the 3 at all times and you accidentally break one, okay, you're still good, right? But what if you accidentally break 2 of them at a time, right? And you were only following 2. That's why we follow 3. So if you have a mistake, if you make a mistake, if you make a bad mistake, guess what? It's pretty hard to break all 3 rules at the same time if you're trying to follow them at the same time. That's why we follow all 3 and not just, well, I'll keep it loaded and I'll put my finger on the chamber, or finger on the chamber, put my finger on the trigger. I just won't point it anywhere that's going to hurt anybody. You know what that's going to get? That's going to get somebody hurt. That's what that's going to get, right? So anyway, that is my little rant. I don't know how many people might be enjoying that or whatever. Nah, just yakety yak. Lots of talking back. All right, guys. That's it. We'll see you later. Be bold. Be safe.